Welcome to Every Child Belongs. I'm Kim Botto, an adoptive mom, grandma, and advocate for kids and teens with disabilities, as well as a longtime leader of kids and student ministries. In this show, we explore how we can create spaces where every child feels heard and valued, whether neurodivergent, differently abled, or they've experienced trauma. Every child belongs. We'll hear from educators, parents, professionals, and more, finding practical ideas that help build a compassionate and supportive world for every child. Let's get started. I'm so happy to have Kara Ryska with me today. Kara, I met through Instagram because she's a special needs mom. She has a special needs mom podcast, and she's the founder of Pathway to Peace coaching community for mothers of disabled and medically complex children. And she's the mom of 4, and this work is also personal, as you're the mom of a brain cancer survivor whose journey continues to shape your family's daily life. And Kara, I know that you have made such an impact in the lives of so many moms who are just out there trying to survive the weight of caregiving, and you provide them with practical tools in a space where they feel seen and understood and less alone. So thank you for the work that you do. And what did I leave out? What do you want people to know about you that I didn't say?
It's a good question. Good thing I was paying attention. Um, let's see. I think beyond that, I think I am a wife of 22 years, 21 or 22.
Congrats.
Either one works.
Yep.
My college sweetheart, and his name is Dan. He's a high school administrator, which I share that because he sits in a lot of IEPs. And so it's been really interesting kind of having him be on both sides of the table as we have navigated a lot of school challenges. And then my 3 other children. So of course, I have Levi, who is a multiple brain tumor survivor. And then I have 3 typically developing children. And so I feel like I hold quite a spectrum in
Yeah, you
terms of
do.
the physical bodies of my children
Yeah,
and
you
then
do.
their intellectual and emotional and spiritual and physical needs, all of that.
Yeah.
And I'm in San Diego, California.
Which I am always so jealous of because that is my happy place.
Here's what's funny though. I want to say from having my own podcast and meeting with so many people all over the world, but mostly United States, I've been like impressed. I don't know the word. Everyone loves where they're from. And I feel like being raised in Southern California, you always hear, "Oh, that's so great in San Diego. That's so great." And then you kind of get a little bit cocky about it. But I feel like also traveling, doing different things over the country, I'm like, everywhere else is also beautiful. I don't understand like, the over expression of why San Diego is so great. Except for maybe I guess like that we like dress the same all year long, which is kind of nice.
As a kid whose mom is from San Diego, so we spent every summer in San Diego, I can give you a list of about 150 things of why. So
Yeah. See,
you
this
have the
is I don't
Pacific
even know.
Ocean. Here's one. You have the Pacific Ocean. I have the Ohio River. Big difference, Kara. Huge
Okay.
difference.
Noted. Noted.
Gigantic difference. Okay. Okay. So we both love San Diego. I
Big
I might
difference.
love it more than you. Um, so you brought up Levi and that he has had multiple brain tumors. So when Levi was first diagnosed, what was something that nobody prepared you for?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. That is a great question. I feel like I was ill prepared in every possible way one could be ill prepared. I, gosh, it was so long ago now, right? So it was over 14 years ago that he was first diagnosed. He was 2 years old with his first diagnosis. So I was a young mom living the young mom life, where I remember, oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing, but also hilarious to think back that like I was worrying about things like, oh my gosh, this is like actually really embarrassing. I brought so he would go to, the church program and they would feed him, I don't know what they fed him, but goldfish. That wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough, Kim. I had to bring organic
Of course.
goldfish or whatever the heck
Course.
I brought. And I'm like,
Course you
"Oh
do.
my gosh, I was really going for it," which is funny. So those are the kinds of things I was worrying about as a mom, as a young mom. So
This is prior
I
to his diagnosis.
that's prior to his
Yes.
diagnosis. So that I'm just painting a picture
Yes.
of the level of which I was ill prepared to handle some things. And actually, and then fast forward to right after his first surgery, I mean, it's very graphic brain surgery. A craniotomy it's not a pleasant experience to witness in your
Mhm.
child. So there he is, kind of literally being put back together again after his surgery. And the first thing they feed him was this fluorescent red popsicle, because like cherry red, right? Like that's just
Right.
how, like that food dye, all the things. And so I go from the level of trying to, eat clean and healthy. I'm from Southern California. So this is just like the culture. Okay. We
Right,
were
I was
just
gonna
talking
say,
about it.
isn't that kinda typical?
It's kind of difficult. So that's where I think just being forced to let go of the things that I was getting my security from, from being
Mm.
able to control a lot to being able to control nothing. And I feel like also I was not at all familiar with the disabled community. It took me honestly probably 5 years after his first surgery and into his recovery to figure out that we were disabled and that I was like, oh, I think what I'm living is the experience of being a special needs mom. And I don't know if it was because our gateway was maybe less traditional than maybe a school diagnosis, like
Mhm.
with special education,
Right.
that we had more of a medical and a clear before and after with a typical up until 2 years of age. But it took me a long time to like even identify that that was the community I now belonged to. The other thing is I feel like I did not know how to process big emotions. Like
Mhm.
absolutely no idea. I just didn't have a family that knew how to do that. And so when I was faced with what it takes to witness and watch and grieve a child's life change in the ways that my son's has, it really required me to figure out how to to feel so deeply and to allow the spectrum of grief that we were experiencing and still experience to be part of our lives and kind of the fullness of our lives, the extreme joy and then extreme fear and extreme grief and all of those, everything in between. So, and I could keep going on for all the ways I was
Yeah.
ill prepared.
No, I want so h because one of the things we wanna do in this podcast is to get people in proximity to people they may not be in proximity to, and a lot of people aren't in proximity to moms like you. So, tell me, how did you then start feeling your
Mm-hmm.
emotions and
Mm-hmm.
expressing them? Because I don't you think a lot of moms who are in your situation on the same kinda journey, don't you hear that from a lot of the moms that you work with?
Yeah, I think what I think would be helpful actually is to briefly describe what I have, I don't know, coined as the evolution of a special needs mom. Because I
Yeah.
think it maps out my journey, but it maps out a lot of our journeys. And I've broken it down. And this is just, what after talking to so many moms and working with so many moms, I noticed a lot of patterns. And I was like, hey, this is interesting. Like, there's these places in which we find ourselves that are a little bit predictable, very understandable, and actually really helpful to identify, like, where are we on the map? And to normalize it. So
Mhm.
the first stage is what I call stunned survival. So this is that stage where your new diagnosis, and that can happen at any point, right? For a lot of people, it's at birth. For a lot of people, it might be around 4 or 5 years, and for us, it was when Levi was 2 years and 4 months. And so this is when you are quite literally, in some cases, not in all cases, like just trying to stay alive. So survival is truly the word here. And this is when you're learning new language. This is when really the only job ahead of you is to survive. And this can
Mhm.
last for a short amount of time. I would say this stage for us lasted several years, maybe even
Wow.
up to 5 years.
Wow.
And I say that also because at the time of Levi's diagnosis, I was also 10 weeks pregnant. So we were going to be welcoming a new baby into the mix along. And so when he was in the hospital, he was in the hospital for just exactly 2 months. When we started and when we were kind of in this prolonged hospital stay, I was like, I don't know if I might have this baby like in the hospital. I mean, not like at the children's hospital, clearly,
Right. Right.
but we might be doing hospital life and having a new baby. Thankfully, we did not. But so that stage is different for everybody, but also has the characteristics of like survival is the thing. Then we moved on to stable yet self sacrificing. And so this is where, and I really work mostly with moms. And so I think it may or may not be consistent with fathers, but this is where I think the instinct of motherhood is such a beautiful experience, right? So mothers by instinct, I think, are self-sacrificing. They,
Mhm.
would jump in the front of the train for their children. And when these children that we have are vulnerable and they need something, we do just that. And what happens is we leave behind ourselves. And so the self sacrificing piece, while I think good intended, I think because of the chronic nature of our lives, it's not sustainable. And so what happens is that then that's when mothers start losing themselves. This is when your question about like, this is when I think the skills of that emotional regulation for ourselves really, or the lack thereof, really becomes the thing that starts to make moms feel numb.
Mhm.
This is when the isolation hits in because now you no longer belong to your old community, but
Right.
you don't yet, you're new and you don't know yet where to belong. And this is really, I think, where the lack of skills is exposed. And so that I think helps kind of create an opening for the next stage. And again, there's no time period for any of these stages, but I would say that and it's I'm presenting it as such like that it would be lineal. It is not at all. It's very circuitous and we go back and forth and that's just the way that life is, right?
Uh-huh.
So at some point though, I think that moms ask themselves the question in the second stage of is this going to be the rest of my life? And a lot of moms say, absolutely not. It has to change. I have to get myself back. I have to rediscover who I am. I don't want to live like this anymore. And so that ushers them into the next stage, which I've called a couple different things, but I guess there's an aspect of it that I call the rebellion. And I think that, but also I would call it the alone and afraid stage. So this is really when there's this rebellion piece where you're going to push back against kind of losing yourself entirely and continuing to abandon yourself in service of your child. And you almost have to let go of the results or the things that you want for your child in order to kind of fully accept your new life. And so acceptance is a huge part of this next
Mhm.
stage. And so the alone and afraid also then ushers in kind of the finding of community. I think community and people are the most pivotal and important part of the what I would call like a rehabilitation or a restoration. And so that's where I think that transition kind of moving from that self-sacrificing to like really stepping into the next stage. Moving on then to the fourth stage is what I call the restoration. And so this is also, I also sometimes call it calming the chaos. And so it's like there's some external chaos, but this is mostly the internal chaos. And so this is where perhaps one has grappled with their faith and kind of landed and kind of restored their relationship with God after some wrestling with the impact of what they have gone through. And I think this is when there's a rediscovery of one's identity. Maybe even some support has been built around this new life structure to even facilitate some of that. So I think about in my own life, in the last couple years, even, we have developed such support in terms of government resources that we have access to now. Looks
Mhm.
like respite providers and caregiving income. And boy, does that make tending to myself a lot more accessible. So that's that stage, the restoration. And the last stage is what I call power, peace, and possibility. And it sounds very lofty, I know. It sounds like a rainbow, like a gold bucket at the end of a rainbow. But really, what it is that reconnection to one's own power, the peace that transcends understanding and possibility of what is possible now. Outside of the really hard circumstances that many of us are in, it's really kind of stepping out of, this thing happened to me and stepping into what's next for me. Really
Mhm.
kind of in that like solid identity of who one is and their place in the world and in their child's place in this world. So it wasn't very quick, like I said, but that is, I think, a framework that has helped. Like if I look at my own life, I feel like I was in that son survival and that self sacrificing or, combination of the two for many, many years. And for me, honestly, I don't know exactly what I was thinking at the time, but for me, I stepped into a coach training program. And that was kind of like where I was going to figure things out.
Mhm.
And never did I ever have any intention, like zero thought in my mind of coaching and working with moms in the special needs community. Like I said, I don't even think I identified as a needs mom yet, even though I was many
Right.
years in,
Right.
but that is what I do now. And it's the work I love.
Yeah, that framework though, that's so good. I, as an adoptive mom, I mean, I'm going, yeah, I was there. Yeah, survival. Oh yeah, giving up all my stuff to just make sure that my daughters are good. And then alone and afraid, rebellion. That's would that be the period where I'm driving on the interstate and looking at vans next to me, thinking their life is probably better than mine, and I would like to be in their van instead of mine?
Yes, it would.
Is that what that would be? Okay.
I could put that on my notes.
That's right. I think it's so helpful though, because one of the things that I found, like what you've done is you've laid out a framework so people don't think, I mean, I would sometimes think I'm crazy. But you go, oh,
Right?
wait a
Okay.
minute. If Kara is experiencing this too, maybe this is just a normal progression when you have an event like this in your life. But I do have a question. You did mention when you were isolated and alone or alone and afraid, that you didn't belong in your old community, but you hadn't yet established your new community. Do we always have to move from one to another? Tell us more about that because I know people will ask me because when I look at the people I can say anything to, they're other
Mhm.
adoptive and foster moms.
Yeah.
Um, so why is that?
Okay, so when I describe that image of like we don't belong to what we did and we now don't have any sense of belonging, I have this very clear picture. I did a couple episodes on grief, and as I was trying to describe the experience of grief, especially as it relates to special needs parenting, many of us think of grief when somebody has passed away, when somebody has died.
Mhm.
We associate grief only to very specific things. But I would say, and many others would say, this is not just a me thing, that the experience of coping with loss is grief. And I'll use myself as the example. I lost the life that I thought I would have.
Mhm.
There was a moment, a conversation I had with a doctor that changed everything. We went from being about a family. I like really had clear images that we were going to be backpacking together as a family. And in a moment, I lost that ability. And
Mhm.
so, and it took years and years and years, and still, we grieve it still every day. But the image I think is really helpful to think about this is it's like everybody that you know is in like a train station and we're all ready to go somewhere together. And we all have this anticipation and we're all excited. And then for whatever reason, you are picked out from the crowd and you are asked to go to another room. There's nobody else in the room. You don't know anybody, or maybe there are people in the room, but you don't know anybody. But I think it's a more powerful image if you're alone. You're unfamiliar with where you are and you don't know how to get out.
Mhm.
And so that I think is the experience of losing one's community. So that room is still back there. You know that room still exists, but you no longer like fit in the room that way that you did before. And so I think that it takes, well, and like you said, the people that I think really get us are the people that maybe have gone through what we've gone through. Even so, I run a community, as I think you mentioned in the intro, and the thing I brought to them in the more like as we were starting out, I was like, "Hey, I think it'd be fun to share just stories, day in the life, that really this community would be the only people that would understand." And I
Mhm.
told a story about a poop situation in the shower, and with all the details, and many of the other women had very similar stories, right? And so we're all talking about these things, which if I told anybody else, if I like, so some of my typical friends, or my friends that have typical children,
Mhm.
I do tell some of them, but I do not tell everybody about that I was digging, poop out of the shower drain this morning.
Mhm.
Some people can
Mhm.
just hold that and some people can't. And so I think what I've learned is that, and actually I was just telling one of my dearest friends that story, who's not a special needs mom, but she said, "Hey, thank you for telling me that story. It's just so helpful for me to really see like what's going on. And I know it might be vulnerable, but I'm just really thankful that you share that with me." And she has an ability, I know, and that's why I shared
Wow.
it with her, to hold it and to not
Yeah.
judge it.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, she will jump into, like, maybe trying to do some problem solving because that's just how she's like a CEO. So, like, that's kind of like her mind is just always going on how
Right.
can we, like,
Let's fix
figure
it.
this out?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like I feel like it's almost like I consider this it's not a great analogy, but I consider all the different friends I have as different, like, tools in the toolbox. And again, I'm not like it's not the great analogy, but we're gonna work with it.
Right.
That some of them are great to have fun with and I can go body surf with them.
Mhm.
And some of them can really sit with me and weep with me. And some of them, we just talk about our kids together. And there's
Mhm.
utility for all of them, but expecting all of them to be all the things, it doesn't serve me and it doesn't serve them. And then I think
Right.
we have this rich pool of, what we would call our special needs community that it just is so much easier for them to hold a lot of different parts of it. So, but
Mhm.
I would also say just by having, the category of being a special needs mom doesn't automatically make people good holders of your story. And so
Right.
you have to find places that still are
Right.
that for us.
But I think it's important that you bring a it's I think much like when our kids grow up, our relationship with them changes. So when we have something that's super life changing that happens to our family, then we have to kind of reassess and navigate. Maybe we still have relationship, but it's just a little bit different.
Yeah, and I think it takes a lot of patience and compassion on our side, I think,
Yeah.
to navigate those relationships, really deeply understanding that it's not that people are disinterested or jerks or anything. It actually is they just don't understand. And so
Right.
I think for myself, I go back to me before, and I wouldn't have understood. I would have been the, like, oblivious person that didn't probably dig deeper into somebody's life. I would have been that person. I have to
Mhm.
acknowledge that, and I don't love that, but I think it's probably true. And I think that it's important for us to, remember that it's not that people don't want to engage, it's people often don't know how, and it's very deeply
Mhm.
uncomfortable. They can't answer the questions of what our lives must be like, and I think a lot of times they think, "Wow, that sounds awful." And so, naturally, people don't engage in those conversations.
Mhm. But I'll also say, how are they ever going to learn
Mhm.
if we don't have patience? And that doesn't mean with every person you meet on the street you have to do this with, but I think it's determining what relationships are worth the work on our end
Uh-huh.
to help inform them. As we continue today's episode, I wanted to let you know that if you're looking for more resources, strategies, and encouragement for making sure every child belongs, head over to our website at kimbotto.com. Sign up for the newsletter to receive exclusive content and insider info on future episodes. Don't miss out. Go to kimbotto.com and join today. Continue on that thought. One of the, I think, to help people better understand the life of a mom of a kid who's not typical, you talk about impermissible thoughts a lot, and you talk to a
Mhm.
lot of moms. So, what are some of the thoughts that moms like you, maybe even you yourself, are afraid to say out loud?
Ooh, that's a good question. I love that question, and I love that episode. It's inspired by a client that I worked with that I just love her so much, and she's a fiery woman. And she came to me and she told me, and this is afterwards, she came to me, "I was throwing everything at you, Kara, because I just thought there's no way that she can still help me." Because what she was struggling with is the complexity of deeply loving her child, although at the time she wasn't able to actually acknowledge that. An impermissible thought is, "I hate my child."
Mm,
An impermissible thought is, "My child's ruining my life.
mhm.
My life would be easier if my child did die." So these are the thoughts that moms are actually having, and you can imagine it's hard to say them out loud.
Yeah,
It's complex.
it is.
And so I think, probably no surprise to you or many listeners though that shame really thrives in secret. And the power of speaking your thought out loud and bringing it to the light and bringing it's almost just like tending to the fear or the hurt that's underneath that thought. Because I'll speak for my client. What we were able to determine for her is 'Cause like I said, she wasn't actually connected with how deeply she loved her child when we first started working together. All she could see is how much she hated the things that were happening in her life. And
Mhm.
so she thought she hated her child. And what she was able to, decipher, especially, it was so interesting too, because I would watch the things that she would do for her child and the way that she would advocate for her child, and it was so abundantly clear that that nobody would act that way for somebody that they hated, right? Like, it was so deep, her love and her care and concern for her child. Yet, she had these very big feelings and she didn't know what to do with them. She was able to distinguish that she hated the impacts of her child's behavior on her life. And that felt okay to hate, right? It's
Mhm.
separating out her child from the impacts of the behaviors.
Right.
And she hated the way that she had to fight to get the services for her daughter that she needed. But she didn't hate her daughter. And
Mm.
separating out that for her was really, really restorative, because no longer then was she just swimming in shame and rage and using anger to fuel her life. She was able to bring in, and for her, a lot of it was sadness. It's actually acknowledging the sadness of her life. But for her, it just kind of, it allowed her to kind of move from that just like fiery resistance and into kind of more of a fullness experience of truth. And that we do that by acknowledging these really, really hard thoughts and really like big fears.
Right. Well, that could have been really helpful to me about 20 years ago, Kara. I paid a lot in therapy to get to that point. So thank you. I mean,
You're
seriously, that
welcome.
right there, just separating it out, because you're right. It's typically not the kid, but we just don't know where to put it on and we need help. So
No.
thank you
Yeah.
for that. So talking about our thoughts,
Mhm.
um, you're a believer, I'm a believer. How have your thoughts about God changed
Mm.
through this journey?
I would say that I really could not accept that God was still good for many years. I couldn't pair the if you have the power, if you have the ability, why would you not why would you not spare this child from some of what he's going through? And it really, really was hard to just be with the idea that God was good. I have a very distinct memory of going to church. I don't know why we were going to one of my friends' churches. We weren't at our regular church. And I walked in, and I don't know what a point this was, but it was a while. It was a long time ago. The greeter was very happy, very exuberant, and I was going through a really hard time. And I just remember them saying, "God is good," and something so. And then maybe there was a comment after that, and I just remember being so resistant, like to almost just being like, "But you have no idea. How can you call this good?" And
Mhm.
so I don't know. For many nights, I would go to bed very, very hopeless, very scared, because financially we were pretty ruined by all of this. So after this is like crazy. I almost want to pull it from my drawer because I could show you the evidence of our tax return. Um, so
Mm.
I couldn't, well, as I mentioned, he had brain cancer. We were in the hospital for a long time. So there's that. I was pregnant, having a baby. I did think I was going to go back to work, but turns out I got laid off. So I had no job. My husband, just maybe 3 weeks prior to Levi's diagnosis, had just started his own business. So he
Oh,
had zero
wow.
income. So
Wow.
thankfully, he was affiliated with some group where he could get health insurance. And so that was a rough start
Yeah,
in
it
terms of
was.
the financial
Yeah.
picture. So we probably didn't make great decisions. And I think that's the tax return in 2012. I think it was like $5,000. That
Wow.
was a rough year.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
That was a rough year, I would say.
Yes.
But I actually I was cleaning up files and I found that I was like, I am keeping this because I feel like it's almost unbelievable to see us now and to see how bad it was. Because I don't think people really would be able. Like, the whole point of the story is hope. I would go
Mhm.
to bed during those years very hopeless. I could
Mhm.
not see a way out. And that's where I think, one step after another, continuing to wrestle with God being good and questioning that and questioning. And really, ultimately, I think where I landed is recognizing that my picture and image and idea of God was so much smaller and
Mm.
like fanciful than it is now. And I think for me, God is so much bigger. And I still don't understand. I still am like, we will have a little chitty chatty. Um,
Yes.
I will have, and so, but recognizing that God loves Levi so much more than I do. And I mean, that's all the answers I have,
Mm-hmm.
like, God never promised that we won't suffer.
He did
That
not.
the thing
That
he
is not
promises, he'll be
biblical.
with us through suffering. And that's, I
That's
think, the
right.
biggest misconception that I think I
Yeah, it
had was
is.
like that the suffering equated to abandonment or to that like we had, done something wrong or that we were forgotten or that God wasn't good because we were suffering. But I think that that's where I recognize, oh, I can look back. And the thing that kind of had me hold on during those years where I was really struggling was the way that people had showed up for us. I was like, I mentioned that we had this very financially difficult year, but we made it. Why do we make it? Because people showed up for us. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the part I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm not sure about you, God, but there is goodness. There is a lot of love out there. So I held on with a thread and I feel like we made it through.
So you did make it through.
Hmm.
And you talk about people showing up for you. Did you ask for help? How did these people know in what ways to help you?
It's a good question, too. Well, here's what's interesting. I was going to mention this earlier. As people relate to, in terms of connecting, I think people think they understand cancer. I
Mhm.
don't think people understand special needs. I think everybody has somebody that they know. They have a picture of cancers in movies, and it's like it's a lot more, I don't know, you just picture, a young pediatric cancer survivor and then they survive and then it's happily ever after, I think is like a lot
Mhm.
of the image
They're on
people
the
have.
track team and they win a
Yes,
trophy
there's
and
all these survival sorties and
yeah.
they go ring the bell after their treatment and then it's all over. But that's not at all actually how it works. It's almost like that's when the journey and the new life begins. But that's my whole thing on cancer is I think that in the very beginning, I think people see the black and whiteness. They saw the like tragic, oh my gosh, this child has a brain tumor, and they came out and they helped. And we did not ask. They just came. And I think that to me was such a beautiful experience of just being on this receiving end of this outpouring of love. And I don't know why it sticks out so much in my head, but there was this gal I went to high school with, Marie Prentice, and I didn't know her that well, but she sent me a $25 gift card for gas and a card. And I just felt
Mhm.
like, wow, it really hit me how little things, not that $25, I mean, it was a lot more then than it is now, but um, it wasn't huge, it wasn't hundreds of dollars, but it meant so much. And so I think that to
Mhm.
me was like, wow, that is okay. Lesson learned, going a little bit out of our way. It's life changing because I'm still talking about
Mhm.
this like
Mhm.
14 years later. So in the early days, we did not ask. People showed up. And I had some family members that were really supportive. Then this is such a funny story. We were walking in Carlsbad, where I lived at the time. There was what was called an art walk. So like a street fair, but with all different artists sharing their art. And so we were walking, down the art walk as one does. And my kids stopped to color at a booth. And the booth right next to us, I was looking at their sign and it said the Mitchell Thorpe Foundation, caring for communities or caring for families of children with life-threatening disabilities or diseases. I just looked at it and I was like, "Huh, that's us." Like it was like the weirdest thing. I'm like,
Mhm.
"That looks like it's exactly for us." And I don't remember the time of year that was at, but so we reached out to them. I said, "Hey, I think we need help." And
Mhm.
I remember I met with Beth and Brad. They came to our house and they brought me the Jesus Calling devotional.
Mhm.
And they sat with me and my husband and they said, we got you, because we were telling them, hey, listen, like our out of pocket deductible is due, $10,000 is due in January, and you just heard my financial situation.
Yes.
So
There were not
so we
sufficient
were
funds.
sweating. No, actually at
Mhm.
that time we had we had savings. We weren't completely ridiculous when we went into my husband's business. So we had some savings, and then we did not. But it was like, how we don't have income, right? So like, how are we going to pay for this? And so they came alongside us, and they, as an organization, they help families fundraise. That's what they do. They do an annual
Mm,
walk. It was in February. And so like we met them in January, and it just all came through. So they were hugely instrumental. And even beyond the financial support there. So Brad and Beth, their story is they had two sons, and one of their sons got a undiagnosed illness or disease when he was like 13, and ultimately passed away 5 years later. And so they found themselves in quite a bit of medical debt. Their community rallied around them, paid off their debt, and they started this organization that still is running strong today. In fact,
mm,
it's thriving. And so over the years they've supported us on and off. And so in the early days I did not ask, but I also feel like what I got really good at actually is receiving. They'd
mhm.
say, "Do you guys need anything?" And I learned to say yes. I think there's so much pride in our culture, I think, about,
Do it
giving,
yourself. We can do it
do it
ourselves.
yourself. And like, the words aren't coming to me. Like, it's better to give than to receive.
Mhm.
I think what I've learned is like the gift of being willing to receive. And I've had people tell me, "Thank you for letting us give this to you." I
Yeah.
remember even more recently, even just a couple years ago after a surgery, one of my friends brought over In and Out, and she said, "Thank you so much for letting me help you. Like, it helps me." And so I think, again, talking to so many moms and really getting, and then being on the other side too, right? When I see my friend going through something tragic, I want to do something. People
Mhm.
want to do something.
Yes.
And if all they can do is bring a meal, by golly, let them. And okay, so I've come a long way. And also, I remember, so Levi went through then recurrence when he was 12. So 10 years after his first diagnosis, very common with his tumor type, he had recurrence. So we were going through a whole new round right after COVID
Mhm.
of surgery and then ultimately radiation. And as I mentioned, we did financially get back on our feet, and we were fine. Like, we live in Southern California, so life's expensive, and my husband's
Right.
in the teaching education. So,
Right.
but we were okay. So I was really conflicted because as we were approaching this, new round of treatment, I was like, okay, like, I almost anticipated people wanting to help us, and I got a little excited about that. And then I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm a creep. I'm like, I'm like, something's wrong with me because I'm now like excited about people giving us stuff or like, blessing us. And then I felt really like icky about that. But then I think at that time I was working with my therapist. She's like, well, no, actually, it's a natural, like, if someone's going to give you a gift, like, that is a pleasant thing. I was like, okay,
Yes.
you're right. Okay. I see that. Okay. I'm glad I spoke this out loud because it was starting to feel really icky inside. But then I had this idea that I should exhaust all of our resources before I accepted any help.
Mm.
And then I oftentimes when I am processing emotions, I don't want to say visions. That makes it sound a little bit more grandiose than it is, but I feel a lot in images,
Mhm.
and I understand the world through images. And so I got this image of me swimming alongside some variation of a ship. And all the people on the ship were like, "Let us help you. Let us help you." And I was like alone in the water swimming. And it was almost the way that I was behaving and believing is almost as if I had to swim and try to get to the island until I could swim no more, until I'd be willing to get into the boat.
Until you'd fully depleted your energy.
Until I totally depleted my energy and resources. And then how the silliness of that, right? When there's a whole
Mhm.
ship of people saying, "We want you to get in the boat. Like, we
Yeah.
don't want to watch you
Right.
nearly drowned. We
Right.
want to help you." And so I feel like I took that image and was like, okay, it's okay to accept support, even if we still have a savings account. Because I
Yeah.
think I was a little conflicted on that. And so we did. We accepted support when people offered to give. We said that would be amazing. And it allowed us to be able to use those resources to get different, therapies for our children, of course, access for stuff for Levi, and just make our life a little easier,
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm really glad that I've continued to work on that. And it's a hard thing.
It is a hard thing. one of our sons was in and out of the hospital. He missed a whole year of school, almost a whole year. He missed 7 months of the year, and people provided meals for us for 6 months, and I finally decided it was too much, that people had done too much. They
Mm.
shouldn't, they're taking my driving my other kids places, they can't. So I told a friend, I said, "Hey, I want the meals to stop. Will you" it was Linda Stewart, it was Linda Stewart, and she said, "If you want to rob people of the joy of being able to support you, I'm more than happy to tell them
I love
not
Linda.
to." Oh, yeah, Linda. So, meals continued, for several more months. So, I think we do lose sight. I think sometimes we're so in our own heads that we don't think about the fact, "Oh, look, when they come in here, they're actually excited to do something tangible to help their friend." So, well, I always loved chatting with you, Kara, and I wanna ask you one quick question from when we talked, and I've actually shared this story. You talked about Levi and his small group met at the beach every week, and I was
Mhm.
telling somebody that story, and, I think he was in high school or middle school at
Mhm.
the time,
Yep. High school.
and somebody said, "What teenage boy wouldn't love meeting at the beach?" So, there are people that don't understand that there are barriers that don't look like barriers. So, tell us, why is the beach not an ideal place? Or why is it actually a barrier to church for
Mm.
Levi?
Well, okay, so Levi's profile, if we look at him, he's physically disabled, so he's able to walk, but his balance is not great and his stamina is not great, and he cannot walk long distances. Or I'd say walk. I mean, he could like he can't. He can't walk long distances. He will use a wheelchair for long distances. So, sand. Sand and parking at the beach. So those two situations make it hard for him to physically get to the beach. And when we go to the beach as a family, we go to very specific beaches that we know have really good access. And this is not one of those beaches that the place that they normally meet. I would say, secondly, for Levi, during that time of day, he has a medical condition that he needs access to go to the bathroom
Mhm.
during that time of day in particular. And so, given that he can't walk very far to the bathroom that is
Right.
there, but quite a distance away, it just makes it very complicated. And so, and then, thirdly for him, and this is, unique to him, but, not unique to all people, then in this particular setting, they have hot dogs and s'mores. And my son is somebody who has a food seeking condition. So he can't really be unattended around
Mhm.
food. And so there's like that additional barrier. So what we were doing was having like my husband go or myself go, but it's just not sustainable, when we
Right.
have three other children
Right.
that have other needs. And then even just the logistical of like, okay, now he needs to go to the bathroom. Like, how do I get him there? And then, having some people that were just kind of oblivious to the needs.
Right.
So
But I
that's
think
why.
from my conversation, some people are just not aware. So I want you to share that story as far as, let's be curious. An environment that we think is wonderful and everybody's going to love actually might just not, it might not be an environment that they can safely participate in. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Kira, we always end with just a couple rapid fire questions. Okay. You
Okay.
ready?
I hope.
I
I'm
know
not
you
very
can think and
decisive.
you can think on your feet. What's the favorite family tradition?
Okay, this one's easy actually. My favorite family tradition is every Friday night we make pizzas and we have a little pizza oven in the backyard and it's like a little like hobby. I'm going to call it a hobby. And I love it because my older son will now invite people over and pizza's like really cheap to make. And so it's like
Yeah, it
invite all
is.
the people. I'll make an extra batch of
I
dough
love it.
and that is my favorite.
I love it. I love it. They'll probably be having pizza when they get older on
Yep.
Friday nights.
My older son's all about like, I'm gonna make pizza a business in college and I'm gonna go make it for the frat guys and earn some money. I was like,
Nice.
let's do it.
Let's do it. That's right. Hey, what's the last thing you said no to?
Volunteering at the Village Fest at my kid's school.
Yep. Sometimes we got to
Didn't want
say
to do
no.
it.
Sometimes we got to say no. That's right. Um, finish this thought. Every child,
Deserves gold. I don't know. It's what came to my mind. Deserves it.
that's right. They do. Well, thank you so much, Kara, for being on. I love chatting with you. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'd say you can access all my rants on the podcast, so at the Special Needs Mom podcast, and then my website is kararyska.com, so there's all different access points there. And then if you still feel in want, you can find me on Instagram at Kara Ryska.
Yeah, and you do all kinds of things, coaching. You provide opportunities for special needs moms to get with one another. So, yeah, check her out. Kara, thank you so much and enjoy the Pacific Ocean as I'm looking at the muddy Ohio River.
I
Thanks for being
will.
on today.
Thank you so much. It was a great time.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Every Child Belongs. If you found today's episode helpful, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to share this with a friend who might need to hear it. Together, we can create a world where every child belongs.